Hello, this is Panda Consulting's ArcGIS Pro workshop, and I'm Frank Conkling. Today's workshop, we're going to look at adjustment tools that are inside ArcGIS Pro. There's a series of tools there that don't necessarily allow you to create features, but they'll actually allow you to adjust the topologic relationship between them. And we'll go over topology, we'll go over these tools, what they do, sort of nuances of some of the tools and such. So hopefully you get something from this and enjoy it. So let's just start. And let's start by just making sure that you understand who we are. If you go out to pandaconsulting.com, you'll see that what the types of services we provide, who we are, individually, who each of us is. But in addition, there's an events page, and on that events page, you'll be able to go and see all of the workshops coming up, including you'll be able to go and see any conferences that we will be at and have a booth at and such. And you'll be able to go and use that. If you want a more detailed list of those events, if you go under the workshops and there's the workshops and events page, that will actually list out the individual workshops that are being scheduled and give you a little bit of information about them. If you scroll down that page even more, it will show you past workshops and give you access to the recordings together with linkages over to the YouTube page, which reminds me, we do have a Panda Consulting YouTube page. And if you go and look, you will find all of the workshops that we've recorded in the last couple of years, covering everything from ArcGIS Pro to the parcel fabric to story maps and arcade and all sorts of information for it. So before we start, let's go and remind everybody that this is being recorded. But if you would, as I'm going through here, if you have a question or if you have some comment that you'd like to go and introduce and have us talk about or have me talk about, please put it in the chat window. Chris with Panda Consulting he's moderating the chat window. And when you put something over there, he will interrupt me and he'll give me a chance to breathe. And it'll allow us to stop and start talking about these other elements in here. We have muted everyone's webcam and we are muting your mics until after the recording ends, and then we can unmute them again and we can talk. So here's what we're talking about. We're talking about in ArcGIS Pro, under the modified tools in the tools gallery, there is alignment tools. And these have to do with sort of how things relate to one another, where they're spatially located and such. The only thing that's not correct in here is this one right here. This one, that really shouldn't be there. But for some reason, that's in the alignment grouping. And so we're not going to talk about annotation at all, but we are going to talk about the move, the rotate, the scale tools, the transform, align edge, align features, and move to. Believe it or not, there's a lot of functionality, a lot of options built in there, and we're going to explore some of those so that you get to know them a little bit better. All right, so let's start with the move, rotate, and scale tools. These are different than inside of ArcMap. So before I start, I have here a simple polygon feature class. There's nothing in here. It's just simple polygon features. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on editing. I'm going to enable editing. I have it set up so that I actually have to start editing and stop editing on here. And just real quickly, if I go to my options, for those of us that like not automatically start editing, under our session, there's this enable and disable editing in the edit tab. When that's checked, you actually wind up with a big button on your Edit tab. Now that button actually, it's when it's enabled, it means you are able to edit. When it's not, you're basically just in a viewing mode, but I'm now going to start editing. In addition to that, just so we can see the relationships of some of these things, I'm going to go and modify the symbology of this polygon feature class, just so we can explore that a little bit more and show you some of the things that are in ArcGIS Pro and how we can actually improve them. So the first thing is we can set the actual color in here that we're going to be using. I'm going to set it to here. One of the things that is not obvious, if we go down to the color properties of this color, I actually can set an individual transparency on this one color and utilize that. When I click apply, it will apply and I can see. Thank you. It says I am sharing it. And you stop sharing.
I can also see your screen, so I'm not quite sure what's going on.
Okay, let me share it back again. All right, thank you. And it says you can now see it. So what this will do is this will allow me to go and see through symbology if I want. It's always a nice thing. While you can go and under appearances, you can set the transparency here. This will set it for all of the symbology for a layer, but you can set individual color symbology here. All right. But however, what we're going to do is we're actually going to do something where we want to see where the vertices are in here. So we're going to go to the properties of this symbol, and we're going to go and look at the structure. And under the structure, we're going to go and pull down and add a new marker symbol. Once we've added that marker symbol, we're going to go over to the actual layers tab on here, and we're going to tell it that we want that to be, let's make it obnoxious. We'll make it red, and we'll make it something like 4 points. But the important part about this is we tell it down at the marker placement where we want that marker to be, and we can say, show us those markers on the vertices of this polygon, and that will allow us to go and see where the individual vertices are. Okay, has nothing to do with the adjustments. Just from a visual standpoint, it gives you the ability to go and see where it is. And I like setting up all my displays like that because that's something I could never do inside of ArcMap that now is very accessible inside of ArcGIS Pro. All right. I have over here my modified features gallery, and I'm going to go and change this to large icons, make it a little bit easier for everybody to see. And we're actually going to be looking at this alignment grouping here. All right, I've started editing. So I can go in here and I can select an individual feature. All right, and just sort of to let you know, I have only one feature selected, and I'm going over to here. One thing you want to be aware of is that most of these tools act differently depending upon whether you have any topology defined. Right now, I have no topology defined, and when I do this, and I take and say I want to move this polygon, it moves it independent of any topology. And topology would have gone and constrained it or modified the adjoining parcels, those that were connected through topology to it. I'm not going to, right now, you just want to make sure whether or not you have topology. Just to demonstrate, if I turn on map topology and do a move again, it now, actually, here it is over here. You can see over here, it's constraining it, and it's going to modify everything else around there like that. So you just want to be aware that and you want to be conscious when you're doing your editing, do I have topology on or do I not have topology on? In this case, I have no topology. All right, so now when I go and select something for moving, and that was a really poor color choice, Frank. Sorry about that. I'm just going to go and make it something where we can obviously see it. Because there's a little yellow dot here. That yellow dot is in fact our snap anchor. Excuse me, that's our selection anchor. And that selection anchor is always located at the midpoint or the centroid of everything that's selected. So previously I only had one feature selected, so my selection anchor was here. If I select something else here and I go to do a move, you will find that in fact my selection anchor has moved. It is at the center of the envelopes for those features that you have selected. And you want to also be aware of that it's going to go and impact according to what you have selected. So be conscious of where that yellow dot is. That yellow dot replaces the old selection cursor that used to be an ArcMap. That's going to go and be sort of snapping where everything gets snapped to it. The other thing is that if I want to move that, I actually have to hold down my control key and click on someplace that I want to move it to. So in this case, I just went and moved my cursor over that point, and I held down my cursor key and clicked on it, and that the selection anchor moved over to that point. Now when I go to move this, I can move it out and it will snap wherever that selection point is. So it will allow me to go and snap on there. Let me go and move this over again. And I can move it so it fits back into where it was supposed to be by hitting that, snapping to that point and hitting OK. You want to be aware of that, though, that depending upon what you have selected, in this case, I had a polygon, so I could select anywhere inside that polygon and it would still move. But if I have a line, I need to be on the line to go and move that line. So it's pretty sensitive as far as where you can drag it, if that's how you're going to go in and do it. So that's the move. And if I go and click this again and move to it, I will see that there isn't a whole lot of options in here. There are some alignment options I can set when I've got multiple things selected, but there's not a lot of options in here when I do right click. That's not the case for other options. For example, I have that selection and I click on rotate. Again, with the rotate tool, it gives you a selection anchor that shows you, oh, here's the centroid of everything that you have selected. All right. And if I want to go and move that over to here, I go and I move my cursor over here and I hold down control key and I click there, and that will move it over to that point. At this juncture, I can go and drag anywhere inside of here and it will rotate and move. And I can then click on the finish button and be done. Let me go and show you something that was very frustrating for me in the beginning. If I go and I click here and I want to go and rotate it, it used to be that you could just rotate and hold down your cursor anywhere and move it. But note, if I did that, it would automatically stop that rotation. So what I need to do is make sure that I am rotating and I'm selecting somewhere inside there where the cursor has changed to a rotate icon. First sort of Rosetta Stone thing that you want to remember. The next thing is I actually have some hidden elements in here that I can go and use. For example, I've moved my cursor, my selection cursor, which is actually going to be what it's rotating around. I've moved that up to that upper corner, and I can actually put another anchor down here at this lower corner, or actually anywhere along the perimeter that I can snap for it. So the way you do this is by going and putting the cursor where you want it to go and then hitting S. And if I look, it actually, let's go and change the symbology one more time. Why do I not pick something that's better? There you go. So you'll see on here, there's actually a little brown snapping anchor now. So now when I do this rotate and I pull this closer, you'll actually see that that brown anchor is going to snap to existing features around there. And that will snap to anything that is, and this is a really good word, that is snappable. So I can now go and click on finish my rotate and it'll be in there. Chris, I saw somebody, Tori put something up.
Tori put a question, to everybody
Yeah.
here in the chat. Does anyone else have any issues with move or rotate not snapping, like snapping is off, then try again and it works? Have you ever experienced that?
I haven't specifically done that, but that brings up a very good point, because I didn't talk about how do you know when snapping is on and when snapping is not off. And if I'm on the edit tab, I can see here that if it is blue, and by the way, that this is a light theme, but if it is blue, if it's got a highlight around it, it means that snapping is on. But if I'm on another tab, I don't see that. Well, it turns out that on the very bottom down here, there's a series of icons that it says whether or not snapping is on. And that's the one right next to where you can input the scale on here. And that will actually show you whether or not snapping is turned on, or I can click on it and snap off. Come on. Yeah. Snapping is off now. Snapping is on now. So even though I might be on another tab, for example, if I have a parcel fabric in here, I might be on a parcel tab or a record tab or a quality driven tab. I always want to just check and see if it's on there. Tori, I think you may have had that. It looks like it's on, but it isn't on for some reason. I've not seen that bug yet, or that instance, why that does that. I always try to be conscious of what I'm doing there, though. But yeah, we'll have to see if we can replicate that somehow. All right, so that is, in fact, the move tool, where, in fact, it gives you the selection anchor. You can go and move your cursor over and hit Control key, and it moves that selection anchor to there. I have no topology, so I can move this over here and say, again, the difference between ArcMap and ArcGIS Pro, you have to finish that move. You have to finish the rotate, such. Another thing that's on here is we have a rotate, and I can go here and click this here. I have another option in that I can rotate and right click. Actually, it's not right click in here. It is the A button. I can hit A and it gives me an angle, and it will tell it how much it's going to rotate this. And I can rotate it in decimal degrees, or I can do it in degrees, minutes, and seconds. So perhaps I want to rotate this 45 degrees from what it is. I can type in 45 degrees and it will rotate it 45 degrees. Now, if I look at that, what did it actually rotate? It rotated from due south in a clockwise direction. So that rotation angle is in a clockwise direction. You want to remember that. If I don't know what happened there.
Little technical failure there.
Thank
No
you.
worries.
Sorry about that. Sorry about that. So what I was going and talking about was, we can take this polygon. Let me start from the beginning here and show you. I can take this selection polygon using what I just talked about before it got kicked out and click on the move. Control click over here on this point, use that to snap to where I want it to go. All right. And then without even finishing this, I can go to the rotate and automatic have it continue to use that and click move S here so it has a snap on here. I can snap down to here and tell it to put it back in here. Again, if I use the combination of them, it's easier to do. Let me go and move this one more time. I want to go and show you the scaling. So with scaling, what it does is it actually goes and uses the overall envelope and gives you handles as far as going and being able to go in and do this. And I can manually go and scale things up and down this way interactively, or I can actually go and tell it, I think there's a way that I can scale it. Nope, it's a snap still. Yeah, thought there was a way to go and scale this up into a discrete number, and I can't see the scale factor. I thought there was a scale factor here. All right, anyway, I can go ahead and do that. So what happens if I've got this situation where something is scaled off differently? I'll probably snap to here and then move to this and rotate it onto here. I'm going to leave that just where it is right there, just so we can move forward. All right, those are the move, scale, and rotate, because I'm going to show you some other tricks here. The next tool we want to look at is the transform tool. All right, the transform tool is a little bit more complex than this. The transform tool, again, we want to go here to the transform tool. Now, what this allows you to do is this allows you to either work with just a selected feature or all the layers in here. And it basically is a way to go and rubber sheet, or I should say a controlled rubber sheet on here. And how it works is that you go and create a series of linkages. And when you click on links, it actually will go and add a feature class here. And inside your default geodatabase, it creates a feature class that stores links. These are lines, and you tell it, I want to take this point and go here. All right, and I'll take this point and go here, this point and go here, and this point and go here. Now, that, believe it or not, is the easiest part about this, because the second part is once you have these links in place, you then have to tell it what type of a transformation you want to occur. And there's 4 different types. There's an affine transformation. The affine transformation requires at least 3 links because it's going to go and calculate sort of the transformation, rotation, and scaling that's going to occur. So it will require at least 3 links. And when I hit transform here, it will go and take those points and move and adjust all of that selected polygons or lines or whatever in accordance with that transformation that it's applying to them. I'm going to go back here and undo that. And I'm going to show you, well, what happens if I do a similarity transformation? Similarity doesn't require 3. You can actually do a similarity, I believe, with 2. And I can go and click on transform there, and it looks like it's the same thing. May not be exactly the same, but it looks close. And let me go in and move this just so we can see this a little bit better. So let's go and move this out of here. All right. And let's use that. Let's take all of our links and select them. So all these links, and just only select them. And let's go here and right click on this and delete them. So now let's create new links here. I'm going to go back to modify, and I'm going to go to our transform. So we can see the differences when between these different transformations. I'm going to say that point goes back there. This point goes here. This point goes here. This point goes here. This point goes here. And I need to make sure I have it selected in this case. And again, an affine transformation will make it fit as close as possible here. If I go back here and do a similarity transformation, that actually looks very close to it also. And I can do a rubber sheeting, and that will do a rubber sheet transformation on here. And because I had exactly the same shape on this as I did before, they all look pretty close. Let's take this and sort of corrupt it a little bit. Let's change that corner there. And let's delete that link on here. And let's create a new link now. I'm going to go to transform, add a link here to here. All right. So again, affine transformation. Let's see, make sure I have a polygon selected, at least some feature selected, and do it. And you can see it couldn't quite get everything in there. It's going to get close, but it's not going to get everything in here. A similarity gets, again, not perfect, but close. What happens when I do a rubber sheet, a linear rubber sheeting in here? That one's actually probably the best so far, because it's not taking the actual shape of it originally and using that, but it's actually just rubber sheeting the vertices. And let's do natural neighbor and see that one actually is fitting very well too. So from this, you can see the transform tool will allow you to go and adjust the location of selected features so that they can fit in with something else. All right. But you want to make sure that you test all of these out as far as what type of transformation you want to occur. I'm going to use the one that doesn't fit very well, by the way, because I've got other adjustments to do. And make sure it goes in there and fits there. One thing you want to remember, I'm going to go back here just so we can see this, and I'm going to open up the attribute table. All right. And we can see here are those vectors, those adjustment vectors. When I do the transformation, they all get deleted. All of the links that are used as part of the transform get deleted after that transformation occurs. So just be aware of that. If you're doing a bunch of transformations, the links are only for that one transformation. So make sure you're aware of that. All right. That is the transformation tool. And those of us that were working with the ArcMap parcel fabric understand those as basically being joins. It attempted to go and make that geometry fit by telling it what corners go to which corners, and it would adjust it to fit in there. And I believe for the most part, it was using affine transformations, but it may have been, because of how well it would fit them together, it may have been that it was using some sort of other rubber sheeting on there. So that's a transform tool. Do we have any questions on the transform tool here?
Not in the chat.
Perfect.
At least for the time being.
I explained that so well. No. Align edge tool. Align edge tool is interesting. in that align edge, if I look at it here, it's not even turned on. And it not turned on because it requires topology. And if I move my cursor over, it says this command is currently unavailable. Enable topology to use this tool. And it doesn't necessarily mean I have a rule-based topology. I can just do map topology. Right? And if you note, the align edge is now available because I have a map topology that I'm using to do this. So how does this thing work? When I click on align edge, it goes and highlights all of the edges of the features inside my current display window. All right? These features inside this current display window. And now when I move over them, when I move over an area where there's a conflict or where there's a gap or an overlap, it will highlight in here that gap or overlap for me. Now, it's important to pay attention to how the highlighting occurs, because where I put the cursor is going to make a difference. If I put the cursor here, the solid yellow line is going to attempt to go where the dashed line is. If I move my cursor over here, closer to the other edge, that dashed line, excuse me, the solid line is going to move to the dashed line. And to show you, I'm going to click on that line and it's going to move over to the dashed line in there and it's going to fill in that gap for me. All right, so if I move over here, I now have another option here in that I have an overlap. Let me move my cursor over. An overlap, if I move my cursor over to this line up here, it's going to show me that it's going to take that overlap and move that edge so that it fits with the other overlap. It's going to eliminate that gap. Same way here, if I go here, I want to pay attention to where it's solid and where it's dashed. As I move over it, I can see what's solid, what's dashed, and I'm going to go and highlight this so it fills in that gap there. And then finally, I have one here, and I can fill it in here, and I can fill it in here, and it actually allows me to go and fill them all in. I'm going to tell you, this is a really powerful tool, but you want to be careful with it, because if you're not paying attention to how you're filling it in, I'm going to go and do this a couple different times here. If I'm not paying attention to what's happening here, I can actually go and fill this in. And if you note, it completely regenerated new geometry for this parcel up here. Same way here, I can go and put it to here. And there are certain instances in which you can make a geometry disappear because it's not doing any checking to make sure whether or not it's in there correctly or not. It is just going and making it that edge and moving that edge. The question that should be asked here is, oh, here, I'm going to do this, watch. It's going to go and now obviously in 2.9, it's going to tell us that it's going to delete that. I don't want to go and do that. Earlier versions of this tool, it didn't matter. It would actually go and just delete it for you. This tool, by the way, is an ArcMap, and it would just delete that for you. So just be aware of what this actually does. It's a very powerful tool. And if in fact you've got polygons in here and you're trying to go and look at the gaps and overlaps, this very quickly will show you where they are. Just remember, in order for this tool to work, you have to have a topology, but it doesn't have to be rule-based. It can be a map topology on here. When I turn map topology off, that tool is no longer available for me. All right. So the next tool that we want to go over is the Align Features tool. And those of you that have been on this workshop with me knows that this is my favorite tool in ArcGIS Pro. This is the favorite tool I have. And this is here. And what this tool does is it allows me to go and redefine the geometry. So I'm going to go and I'm going to use a fairly large tolerance. I'm going to use 100. And I'm going to go and draw a line here to here to here, then down to here. All right. So what this tool will do is it will analyze every vertex inside of this tolerance, this buffer tolerance that I generated. It will analyze every single vertex and move that vertex so that it matches the path that I drew. And so when I hit a line here, it will go and reconfigure that polygon. And if you note, let me go in and undo this and redo this again. What it did is it went and not just moved the edges, but it actually removed vertices that were in the middle there. Same thing here. If I go over here and do this, I can now go and tell it that this is supposed to go here to here. And as long as that edge is inside my tolerance, in this case, it's not. So I'm going to increase this to 15. It will move that edge over so that it is coincident and gets replaced with whatever the geometry is that I went and drew, and remove any individual vertices that might be in there. Let me do this one more time so I can straighten this out here. And again, that vertex is in here, so it will move it over. Again, I'll go and do that to here, and do that. You can see you want to be careful with and watch how you're drawing angles here, because it will sometimes pull things over. This is one of my most favorite tools, to the point where if I have densified curves inside of my data, I could go and use an endpoint curve tool to go and move the densified curves and replace them with, in fact, true geometric curves on here. This is pretty big, so let's take this down to 5 feet. Let's do curves in here. Endpoint curve, do it to there, and it replaced all those densified curves with true parametric curves on here. This is a great tool. Let's look in here. We've got extra vertices. This same adjustment tool can be used to go and clean up, to move interim vertices on your data. Now, often I get asked when I'm showing this and teaching this, well, how did those vertices get in there? I didn't put them in there. It turns out that topology, true rule-based topology, goes through a process where it goes and analyzes every feature that's included in that topology, and it intersects them all to create a vertex in all those layers where they intersect. It's called cracking. So the first process in validate topology is cracking them together, and then it takes those points, and if they're close together, it pulls them together or clusters them, and then it goes and runs through and validates the rules. But what I'm saying is that these vertices appear in all of our data. If we have topology, they appear in all of our data. If we took this from CAD files or shape files, we would have densified curves in here. So these extra vertices are all over the place. For the most part, they're not harmful. When you're dealing with parcels, you often want to go and make sure that you have as clean a line as possible. But so often we'll go through and clean this up before we move this into a parcel fabric or put it in any way where you're looking for just the lines. You don't want to see where there's been any intersections and such. All right. This is a great tool. This is, we actually discovered this about almost 5 years ago in ArcGIS Pro. I think it was 2.1 was where they first put the tool in. And it includes things such as the ability to change and modify the tolerance, how it goes and preserves things, whether or not it goes on both sides of a line or whether it's just on one side of a line, and whether the end point on here, let's go and do this so that we can show you what that's like, and whether or not the end point is rounded or it's squared. And then finally, we have this ability to go and check and say, adjust something and make it fit this new alignment, whether I have selected it or not. So you can work without actually selecting the features to be modified and have them cleaned up fairly quickly on here. By the way, this is like, it's like putting puzzles together. It becomes addictive after a while when you see data that's got these things on here. All right, that is align features. Again, the only thing you want to be aware of is oftentimes when you're doing things that have sharp curves on them. Let's see if I can do this. It will often go and impact those intersections between there and the sharp curves. That time it didn't. But let me go in and do this and see if we can get it to change. It didn't change here, but there are instances where in fact it will change that intersection. So you want to be careful with it. All right. Any questions or comments on those, Chris?
Not right now.
Okay, thank you. Move to tool. This is a one that is inside of ArcMap, but I kind of like the way it works here in that I have anything selected and I can go to the move to tool. And when I click on move tool, I now have options on here as far as whether or not I move it to an absolute coordinate point, to a delta, meaning how far in the X, how far in the Y, the difference in the dx dy. So let's look at this. If I do it 10 feet in the X, 10 feet in the Y, I want to be sure whether or not I have topology on here, and it will go and move it 10 feet each way. I'm going to undo that. I can also go and say absolute XY. Perhaps this thing should have been 1410. Oh boy, I'm way off on that. I really don't want to do that. Or I can tell it in a specific direction. I can say 45 degrees north to east and move it 20 feet in that direction, and it will go and move it relative to that. One of the things that's interesting is that when you're looking at absolute in here, if I remember, there's a way, and I think, no, I guess there isn't. I thought there was a trick to go and telling it where this absolute value is. Is it in fact the center of that selection, or is it one of these other points? I haven't seen that yet, where you can actually tell it which actually vertex to use for this absolute. Right now, I think it is just the centroid that it's going to go and move it to. So again, if you want to be careful, because if in fact you have topology turned on here, and you move this in a dx dy, and you move it 15 feet in the x and 15 feet in the y, that didn't make any difference in here. I know on rule-based topology, it will make everything that's connected to it, but in this case, it does not. All right. So do we have, and again, that's about all we really need to show on move to. It's one of those things where you can take this and move it into another area if you want, but you do have to know what that absolute X and Y is. By the way, this move to tool is actually very useful if you're looking at control points inside of a parcel data set where you want to move control points and get them to fit. You can often go in and do that if you have a new coordinate value for one of the points. If you have more than one point, there's better ways to go and do that. All right. So what we did is we showed you so far, we showed you the move tool and how to go and change your selection anchor so that you can make it for snapping. You could also change that for rotation. When you do a rotate, you could also get an auxiliary snapping anchors to make sure that it snaps to an edge or snaps to a point so that it exactly matches what the rotation be. Or you can actually go and type A and actually have it rotate a specific angle. Scaling, you can go and scale up and down. I haven't, in using and the type of work I do, we don't do much scaling, but I know if we were doing buildings or units or something like that, we might use scaling a little bit more, but for the most part, we don't use scaling. Transform, this is a really, really interesting tool in that it allows you to create links between them, between vertices, and use those vertices to make it fit. Just as and just a hint, you're going to want to make sure that you experiment through all the different transformation techniques, whether it's affine, similarity, or whether it does a rubber sheeting. And then we have the align edge tool, which works with a topology, whether it's map topology or rule-based topology. You just want to recognize that the solid edge is going to be moved over to the dashed edge. My favorite tool, the align features tool, is one in which you tell it a tolerance. You tell it where you want that edge to be, and it will go and realign all features, whether they're selected or unselected. You have that option. And then if you have other layers turned on, it will actually drill down through all the layers and make sure that all the layers are coincident with that new feature geometry in there. And then finally, we looked at the move to tool, and that it allows you to go and take something and move it in a set direction on here. There's a little bit less granular capabilities on here, but it's still a really good tool that you'll use sometimes. All right, if there are no other questions, I think I'm going to go and stop this. Hopefully you enjoyed the workshop. I am sorry about those glitches. I don't know why Zoom kicked out on me, but I'm glad that we were able to recover. Hope you enjoyed the workshop, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Thanks. Bye.